emergency? Yeah, there's a shooter at Wedgwood Baptist Church.
There is a time for everything.
Looked like he was headed for the worship center, which is where all the youth are.
A season for every activity under heaven.
Guns are still being fired inside. Okay.
A time to be born and a time to die.
Yes, there have been shots fired, people have been hurt. Okay.
A time to plant and a time to harvest. A time to kill. And a time to heal. Wedgwood Baptist Church, Fort Worth, Texas. So hidden away in this suburban middle-class neighborhood that members like to say you can only find Wedgwood by accident. And yet, from all accounts, it was no accident, the evening of September 15th, 1999, when Larry Gene Ashbrook entered the church and opened fire, killing 7 people and wounding 7 more before fatally shooting himself. Witnesses heard Ashbrook say he was looking for a prayer meeting that night. Instead, he encountered a sanctuary full of young people, joined together from area churches and schools to celebrate See You at the Pole, a national observance of student-led prayer. The shooting spree began in the South Foyer, a favorite gathering place for adults before Wednesday night choir practice. Ashbrook then shot his way down the hall and into the sanctuary. While the attack lasted only a few minutes, it changed hundreds of lives forever.
Pretty much things were going as normal, and it was a normal Wednesday night.
We sat out on the couch out there and visit, and we had this joke about Troop Browning. It was Troop Browning out there.
Sidney Browning had just, maybe just a minute or two more, had just walked in the door and had sat in the couch, which was the last place that there was.
We were sitting there talking, and I noticed the man walking across the grass. And he was I kept my eyes on him because he was very deliberate and very intentional in what he was doing, and he looked angry.
He had a cigarette in his mouth, and that's what caught our attention, and he was almost to the door and obviously was not planning on taking it out.
And since I'm on staff here, that kind of fell under my shoulders, and I approached him, and I got about probably 8 to 10 feet from him.
Jeff had on his uniform with the name Wedgwood, so he looked official. The man reached for the door handle and came in and walked to about the middle of the room and asked, "Where's that bleep meeting going on?"
And before I had a chance to say anything to him, he pulled out a 9mm pistol and started firing.
There was no doubt in my mind that there was a gun in his hand.
He shot twice at me and hit me twice, and then he turned and started firing at the people who were to my right, sitting on the couch and in a couple of chairs.
I drew my legs up and I grabbed hold of Sidney, and we were just, please God help us.
I kept reaching over the arm of the sofa trying to get Glenda to get behind the sofa with me, and she was frozen.
What was going through my mind was, is this real? Are these really real shots?
It just happened so quick that you don't really have time to react or think about it.
And he just pulled out this gun and started shooting, and first thing that ran through my mind was, run.
The gunman pointed the gun right at me, and I begged him not to kill me. And at that point was when he turned the gun on Sidney and fired, and unfortunately I saw that.
And the first thing that I remember hearing from anyone was Jane Ann Brown saying, I've been hit, my head, I'm bleeding.
There's a small pause, and I guess that's when the gunman walked down the hallway a little bit.
I look up, and there is standing there a man dressed in jeans, tennis shoes, green jacket, and a ball cap, with a gun in his hand, pointing it at a group of folks who I couldn't see.
Of course, I had 2 children in the sanctuary, and I'm thinking, please God, protect them.
And I remember hearing Larry say, "Come on, we got to get out of here," and we all jumped up to run out.
I was shot in the hip The bullet went through my left hip joint, went through my colon, and lodged in my right hip joint, and I immediately fell to the ground.
I turned as I got up and looked, and I saw Sidney wasn't getting up.
I examined the wound, and I knew there was no possibility of survival. So I just said aloud, I said, "Sidney, forgive me."
We were just kind of up there, just really just hanging over the balcony, looking at all the kids and watching them praise God, and just thinking how cool that was.
I saw the glass bust out of the back of the window. And then I said, "Everybody get down, this is real."
And we turned around, we were sitting on the front row, and we saw this domino effect, and it just was everyone from the back just going down, hitting the ground.
And that's the first time that it occurred to me that this guy had a real gun. And the only thing I could think about was, this guy's going to go down each one of these rows and just murder every one of these kids.
From the moment he entered, he was just firing gunshots, and one right after the other.
And it was just a barrage of shots, and it was deafening.
It kept on going, and I kept on going, and I started crying because I was scared.
I heard 2 gunshots that were much louder than what had been taking place before, with somewhat of a groaning sound at the end of that, and that was when Shawn Brown was shot and killed.
I was thinking with my leg, I'm gonna get shot, but I didn't think I was gonna die. There's that voice, the peace that passes all understanding that says, "You're not gonna die, I'm not ready for you."
And I can remember grabbing her and saying, "Mary Beth, hush, be quiet." And then she says, "Well, I think I've been shot."
When I actually saw people with physical wounds, I realized it was real. I knew it was real.
And I saw Larry in like a position like this, like aiming, and saw fire coming out of his gun.
It seemed like he shot at me, and it went in between me and my friend's head sitting next to me. And I guess that's the one that hit Cassie Griffin.
And so I was like patting Christy's leg behind me, and I was like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And she wouldn't answer.
I just saw the flash of the gun, and then I kind of started falling backwards, and I felt something hit me on the shoulder, and it hurt pretty bad.
I was just like, "Please make this stop, please make this stop, please let Christy be okay."
And I felt some heat against my arm. I looked down, and there's a spent bullet sitting right next to my arm. I just picked it up and held it.
He walked by me one time and then walked back. I think that's when he threw the pipe bomb.
It wasn't just a bang. It was like you could feel it almost, and it was so bright I could see it reflecting off of the ceiling of the church.
And that's when it really hit me that this was real, that I could die from this, and that's when the terror really began.
I was scared to death. I didn't want to die.
Just let it end soon, let it end soon, and whatever you do, God, please don't let it be real.
The nightmare would indeed end soon, thanks to a remarkable act of courage by 19-year-old Jeremiah Knights, who was, by his own admission, an unlikely hero.
I don't think it was me doing it. It was God. It might have been God working through me, but it wasn't me.
I noticed Jeremiah getting up in the pew and getting in a kind of a prayer stance. I'm like, what is he doing? And so I start grabbing his pants leg and start trying to pull him back down.
And I was sitting down in the pew praying, and he's shooting around me.
I was under the pew. And I looked, all the other youth ministers were under the pew, and Jeremiah was the man for the moment.
And I said, what you need is Jesus Christ in your life.
Because of what I knew about Jeremiah, of all the people in the auditorium, he would be the least likely, the most least likely person that would stand up and confront a gunman with the gospel. It is totally just amazing to me how God used that.
They pointed the gun at me, and I stood up, put my hands in there, and said, "You can shoot me if you want, but I'm going to heaven. How about you?"
I'm really grabbing his pants this time to get him down, because I realized he had a child on the way, and a fiancé that loved him.
And he just looked at me and said something like, "Whatever, shut up." Then he looked at me again, and then his face just went white.
There was a pause, and then the gunshot. And I thought for sure, any moment he was just going to fall to the ground, or I'd have blood in my hand on his pants or something. And Jeremiah just kind of walked out and said he shot himself.
I didn't realize what I was doing at the time until I got out. When I got out in the field, and I just passed out. So I didn't realize I was doing it until after it was over with.
From the very first moment that I met Jeremiah, it has just been a miracle. I just see God's fingerprints over this entire thing with Jeremiah. Just how things happen has to be God, has to be his fingerprints.
God works in mysterious ways, so I don't know if I ended it. I don't know what I said ended it. I just know it ended, and that's the only thing that matters.
As the shooting ended, people rushed outside onto the church grounds, beginning a long process of evaluating the aftermath and trying to make sense out of chaos. Rest would never come for some families that night as they searched for answers well into the morning hours.
I was sitting here at the house, and the phone rang, and it was Trelisa, and she was just frantic, and she'd said, you know, David, you have to get down here. Cassie just got shot. And I thought, I just didn't believe it, because that was just the furthest thing. I mean, Cassie was at church, of all places. How could she get shot at church?
As I drove up, it was like a beehive with all the helicopters buzzing overhead. And then could only park within a half a block of the church, and ran up, and already there was just chaos of kids in shock, crying out, and parents, where's my child?
By the time I had gotten there, all the emergency people were there, and it was like a war zone in my church.
And I just thought, God, help our families, help our kids. I just started to pray.
The rest of the next half hour to 45 minutes was me walking around looking at my kids.
We went together and immediately went to where the youth had started gathering. And found Kristen, Cassie's best friend, and she was just hysterical.
I then began to cry, and at that moment, one of my parents in the youth group came up and just gave me just a big bear hug. And at that moment, my legs just went out on me, and he just began to carry me.
That night was a nightmare for me.
This was my church. This was a special place. Now, we carry the temple of God around with us as believers wherever we go, but there are some special places where we meet God with regularity, and our sanctuary is one of them. And to see it denigrated like that and made a place of death and violence and terror, it hurt me, it wounded me badly in ways I haven't fully even dealt with yet.
Dr. Al Meredith, known to church members as Brother Al, pastor of Wedgwood Baptist Church. He began September 15th in Michigan, where he had gone to bury his mother and say goodbye to his boyhood home. Returning just prior to the shooting, Dr. Meredith had taken little time to reflect on his own loss when faced with a flurry of questions about the attack on his church. One question in particular seemed to be on people's minds.
Where was God in all this? That's one of the first questions I was asked that morning after the tragedy, and the answer God gave me was he was right exactly where he was when his own dear son suffered and died on Calvary's cross, and he knows what it's like to be a parent to see a child die cruelly and unjustly, and his heart is broken with ours, and he weeps with us, and he understands, and he was right there when it happened, and he's going to turn even this to good as he did his own son's death.
Dr. Meredith spent the next days and weeks counseling those around him, with the weight of his mother's death tucked away somewhere beneath the surface.
She died Saturday morning, and so Monday morning, the 13th of September, I preached my mother's funeral, and I remember wondering, thinking when I get back to Fort Worth, I'm going to need time to process this grief, because I hadn't had any time of my own mother and just process it all. She was the greatest. She had a love for life, took great joy in the simplest things. She ever grateful for the blessings God gave her. Living on that river was her dream come true. Loved nothing better than to see the Monday morning wash on the line blowing in the breeze, keeping her house clean, looking after her 4 children, looking after her husband, seeing the moon come up over the water, and she'd say, look, a path of diamonds right to our door.
Kay Meredith had traveled to Michigan with her husband for his mother's funeral and was with him at home when they received the unthinkable call.
He had just gotten out a folder of old photographs and documents that he had gotten from his mother. He said, I'm in no big hurry tonight. Let's just look at this, and then we'll go in to the kids where they're having the concert. We'll sit on the back row and just enjoy the rest of the concert. Well, he had no more opened that folder and began to pull out pictures to show me when the telephone call came.
I think the Lord's timing is always perfect, but it was pretty obvious this time. My emotions were numb, coming back from Mom's funeral and all of that. And that was God's way of anesthetizing my emotions, so that when I walked onto the chaos of the scene here, I didn't go into shock and just totally break down. I was already numb. And so that was God's way of enabling me to minister to hundreds of people that first night, and to continue on for the next several days.
One of the most incredible displays of the Lord strengthening Al occurred in the days following the shooting. He had to prepare 5 funeral messages, and the phones were ringing constantly. People were coming over. It was absolute chaos. And I would watch him go sit down at the kitchen table in the midst of all the chaos, pull out his Bible, and begin to write down messages. And before too much time had gone past, as he would eke out 5 to 10 minutes at a time, he got those 5 funeral messages. And so you knew that it was only the Lord who could empower someone to do that.
The people whose lives were taken were some of the brightest and the best. Sidney would call a spade a spade. I mean, she would, if she had a bone to pick with you, she'd tell you. And if there's something she thought wasn't being done right, she'd tell you. But I never doubted that she loved the Lord, she loved this church, and she loved me. Shawn was the best of the best. He was a baseball player from Howard Payne University, full of life. He wanted to be a youth minister, but he loved children, he loved youth, he loved senior adults. Kim was just utterly throwing herself into praise and worship, and then all of a sudden the bullet snatched her life and ushered her into eternity. She just loved the Lord and lived every moment in His presence. Cassie was 14 years old, phenomenally mature in the Lord, and a heart for reaching her friends for Christ. That's what she was doing that night. She had brought all of her friends, and they were there to hear of the love and grace of Christ. Christy was the only one who didn't die immediately by the gunman's bullet, and because of that, they were able to donate many parts of her body for transplants. She always was a giving person, and even in her death, she was just a sweet-spirited, godly young lady.
On Friday, September 17th, law enforcement officials released the church sanctuary. For many who had experienced the nightmare only 2 days earlier, returning to the scene allowed their healing to begin.
Honestly, I don't think there's any place I'd rather be, because I know that God's protected me through this. I know He's been the only reason I've been able to make it through, and it's just, when I come back, it's just, I feel this amazing connection with God, and I just feel His peace and His love.
When I walked in the room and I saw no carpet there, I mean, obviously I thought of that night, but I wasn't scared at all. I knew that, you know, God was there. He'll always be there.
I was one of the first people in, and I walked into the sanctuary. It wasn't actually all cleaned up. I mean, there were still a lot of messes in there. And I walked in and looked at the screen. And there was a song up there that they were singing that had the phrase in it, you know, I will call upon the Lord, and so shall I be saved from my enemies. And the reality of that hit me, that's what exactly happened. That the enemy came in, and there were some people that were saved.
A few days later, young people were encouraged to express their feelings by writing messages on the concrete floor.
So I walked through the church before that meeting and grabbed every marker I could find and gave the kids an opportunity to just take a marker and go right on the floor, thinking that the very next day they were going to put carpet down on the floor and the opportunity would be gone. Well, we started that at about 10 o'clock. At about 12:15, I told kids they just had to go home.
Oh, the stories there, where Sidney died. Dear Squid, they called her. You were the first one who ever taught me how to really worship and praise with God. Dear God, this was where I ran on that night. I vow never to run again. By God's grace, I'll stand firm for you. Dear God, this was where I was when this person died next to me. Thank you for your protection.
You know, when you sit there and the writing on the floor and you see kids go over to where Larry Ashbrook killed himself and just tell them that they forgive him and tell them that, you know, I mean, what these kids went through in the church, it was horrible.
These kids went through basically a war zone.
It's almost like there's two time periods in my life now. There's a before the shooting and there's after the shooting because of how much things changed.
There was not one thing negative written, not one thing bad. I mean, it was all just praising God and thanking God and forgiving and letters to the ones who died. And I mean, it was overwhelming.
By Saturday night, the church had been cleaned, but there were still visible reminders of what had taken place. Bare floors, missing pews, shrapnel and bullet holes in the walls and ceilings. Nevertheless, the sanctuary was filled to overflowing that first Sunday morning.
Praise the Lord. If I didn't know better, I'd say we were having church today. Praise God. Amen.
It was so crucial that we meet again without missing a day and worship the Lord, even though the carpet was torn up. It doesn't make any difference. It didn't. We are not going to let the father of lies, who was a murderer from the beginning, cower us into retreating 1 inch from the battle.
When the gunman came in to the door of the vestibule, I don't think many people know that what he said was, "Where's the prayer meeting?" If the enemy can stop us from praying, he's won.
I had no doubt in my mind that we were supposed to be there. I had no doubt in my mind that people would come and it would be an incredibly great day. And it was. It was everything I expected more.
Wedgies came back. We call ourselves wedgies, and get over it. But came from all over the country. One of our missionaries flew in from Amman, Jordan, just had to be with us. Drove in from Arizona, Oklahoma, Alabama, Louisiana, as well as all of them that are local here and others who've gone on to other churches to serve.
We went to the service on Sunday, and it was remarkable. It was, we all cried. We cried all the time. But we cried throughout the service, and we praised the Lord in ways that I don't think I ever had.
That Sunday morning, you could feel the Spirit of the Lord so present and so prevalent. Yes, there were certainly those tears because even among our choir members, we had lost two, Kim Jones and Sidney Browning.
I looked up there and I thought, well, my lands, the choir's full except there's 2 vacant seats. And then I saw the 2 robes with the roses. And that was a beautiful thing. And the choir, and the congregation, everyone just outdid themselves to make it a victory thing. Victory over evil and over the devil. It's a beautiful service.
There was a couple times when our music director wanted people to sing, and we just wouldn't sit down, rather. We just wouldn't sit down. We just had to stand and sing at every verse.
And even though there were tears, there was great rejoicing. And that's hard to explain. And as we sang Holy Ground, we knew that we were standing on holy ground.
Christy Beckel.
Later that Sunday afternoon, 15,000 people gathered at Texas Christian University for a citywide memorial service.
Sidney Browning.
The multi-denominational service was broadcast live, reaching millions of households around the world.
Susan Kimberly Jones.
The memorial service punctuated a remarkable 4 days, during which Wedgwood Baptist Church first lost its innocence, then reclaimed it in a sad but victorious celebration. Healing for the church was underway, but for the families of its fallen, it was still only beginning.
Hallelujah.
In the news, they were called victims, but in life, they were called son and daughter, brother and sister, teacher and student, spouse and friend. For loved ones, the losses are not something they will get over, rather something they will go through, one day at a time. 14-year-old Christy Beckel was known for her compassion and generosity, both at church and at Bethesda Christian School, where her mother Debbie is on staff, and where Christy played basketball and volleyball.
Christy Beckel was the type of person that everybody really wanted to know. She always had a smile on her face, always very outgoing and personable. She always had an encouraging word, never a bad word to say about anyone.
The thing that stood out the most to me about her was her faith and how much she just totally loved the Lord, and it showed in everything that she did.
She was always ready to listen to other people and always encourage them and always smile just to brighten their day.
She never said anything bad about anyone. The whole time I knew her, just always very polite and she listened to authority, and she was really good at that. And just a great friend, great gal, and I miss her. But I'm really relieved because I know that I'll see her again, and that brings me great joy, and I can't even describe it.
For those closest to the Beckels, Christy's compassion was part of her upbringing, which was demonstrated in the family's darkest hour as they put other people's needs before their own.
The Beckel family, I was there actually at the hospital when she arrived and had found out that her daughter had been shot and killed, and it was such a testimony to me because she never ever was bitter or angry, and they just graciously, wanted to give life to someone else, even though their daughter couldn't. And the best way to do that was by donating her organs.
And it really helped me to know that parts of her, like her heart still beating and helping someone else, giving someone else life. And I know that if she could have helped other people with her earthly body, that I know she would have wanted that. And I was so happy that they did that.
They not only donated part of Christy for other children to go and have life, but they also thought of us as a school and said, it'd be really nice to donate that money and those donations that people want to give to our family back to the school so we can have a better gym floor.
The floor used to be carpet, and we would always scrape our knees up, and her and I would compare who had the biggest scabs. After every practice, she usually won.
Our knees looked horrible at the end of the season. It just didn't look good. So I think she would have really been excited to have seen the gym floor the way it is now, because it's really nice and it looks really good. And I bet it slides very well. If you want to dive for a ball, it does do very well. It was just such a miracle, and the way that God really worked through them. And they're just such a giving family. I mean, they ended up helping other lives and us as a school in the midst of their grief, and it was just a tremendous testimony.
And in my life, my Redeemer is faithful and true.
Don and Diana Browning have always shared their passion for music with daughters Sidney and Shannon. But while both girls inherited the love of music, one had the gift.
She liked to play and to listen to boogie woogie, and she didn't need music, and I was always envious of that because I had to pick out every key and learn it, and she just had the gift.
Her love of music, I like to think of one of the first pictures we have of her is she's sitting down at the piano practicing, and as I said, she was a tomboy with a tomahawk stuck in a band on her head, and she wouldn't separate the two, but she always just loved to sing.
Sidney was a total tomboy. Her middle name is Rochelle, and she went for a while by Rocky. she decided that that would be a good name.
She liked sports, cared nothing about dolls. I think she had one that she maybe slept with. It was kind of a bear, but that was it. That was a token, probably to appease us.
She just could see something wryly humorous in almost everything.
I'll be somewhere, and something will happen, or someone will do something, and I know that if she were with me, we would share knowing glances, you know. And all of a sudden, I realized that, well, I can't do that, you know.
If she decided she was going to do something or commit to something, that was what it was. It was 100%, I'm going to do it. You know, whether it hair lips the governor was one of her favorite sayings.
She found Wedgwood, and it was a love affair from the very beginning. She fell in love with the music. She loved the style of worship they had.
When she sold out to it, that was it. Wedgwood, tooth and toenail.
I've been amazed how many people in pastoral counseling have come and told me Sidney was their best friend. Singles, married people, older people. Sidney loved people.
A lot of times she'd be walking around, hugging on the kids, and she knew every kid's name. She'd be talking to all the seniors and hugging them and stuff, and she just looked like she was running for office.
Sidney was probably the person that could make me laugh harder, make me cry harder, make me happier, and make me madder than anybody else in the whole wide world.
She loved all kinds of people, from children all the way to senior adults.
Several of the seniors would tell me that they'd rather have Sidney sing, specials in church than anybody they knew.
Come to me as I fall down at your feet.
Sidney's family lived in Phoenix, Arizona. On the night of the shooting, they were 1,000 miles away from Fort Worth, but they were all in the place where they spent every Wednesday night.
We were at church on September 15th.
The pastor just said that Glenda, Sidney's friend from Fort Worth, had called and said that there had been a shooting and that Sidney was hurt and we needed to come.
Mom and I were blubbering and bawling and probably yelling. And I remember we both said she wasn't supposed to get shot at church.
Her mother and I think we both felt that she was gone on the plane ride.
Grief is something that I don't believe anybody can tell you about it if they haven't experienced it.
It's unnatural. It is just so unnatural. It's not the natural flow. It's not what God planned, I think. It's not the perfect plan to bury your children.
Yeah, I know we all die, but why this age? Why this situation? Why didn't I get to say goodbye? Why didn't I get to see her?
I really credit our faith in Christ, and I credit our tremendous network of Christian friends, and with a lot of the healing. Just the fact of their support was so great, and is to this day so great, and it's for those people, and it's a debt of love that we can't repay.
And I'm very thankful because I have wonderful friends and wonderful family, and I serve and have a wonderful God, and he's not going to leave me bleeding and hurting all the time. He's not going to zap me and say, okay, you're okay now because you're a Christian and things are great and you have hope and they're not really dead, they're in heaven. Sometimes that doesn't make any difference. Sometimes I'm just kicking and screaming and saying, I don't like it. She may be in heaven, but I'm down here, and what are we going to do about that? And he deals with me, and he bandages me up or puts on the salve or whatever it is for that moment, and keeps bringing it along the way.
2 Corinthians 3:3 said something about you are a letter written by God, not with pen and ink, and not on marble or stone, but in the human heart. And I think that was Sidney. She was a letter written by God in people's hearts.
Cassie Griffin's bedroom is the same today as it was on September 15th, 1999. It's a place for her parents and brother Chris to come and remember a vibrant 14-year-old girl who loved basketball, popular boy bands, teen heartthrobs, and especially frogs.
When Cassie was, I think, in the 4th grade, she decided that she needed something to collect. All her friends were collecting different things, and so Cassie thought frogs were cute.
She loved frogs in the color green.
Right after we moved to Fort Worth, she was going into the 7th grade. She and Teresa were at a Christian bookstore and saw a t-shirt that said F-R-O-G on it, and under it said, "Fully rely on God. His grace is free, so jump for joy. Always remember, frog, fully rely on God." And so anybody that comes to our house and looks around is going to see lots of frog stuff.
She always wanted people to smile. That was what all the kids say about her, you know. She always tried to make them smile.
She was an energetic Christian. She loved God. She loved being one of God's children.
She always wanted to bring her friends to church. Anytime there was something going on with the youth group or something special going on at church, she wanted to bring friends with her. And that's what she did the day of See You at the Pole.
She was so excited. You could just tell she was glowing that day.
Cassie had been planning on the See You at the Pole rally for at least a week before it happened.
Cassie was so excited about this concert with the band 40 Days being there that she wanted to get there early to get the best seats in the house, you know. And as she normally does, she brought 4 or 5 kids home from a school with her, and Teresa fed them. And so I, told them I'd have to catch up with them later.
As mom, I not only was taxi driver, but I was also photographer that night. And so I had my camera, and I was responsible for taking a picture of the cute one in the band. I don't know which one that was, but I was supposed to get the cute one.
Cassie got shot. Where? I don't know. She was in the...
What had begun that night as a happy outing for Cassie and her friends ended in tragedy for her family, as the Griffins learned that something they never would have imagined was now their painful reality.
Even in this violent age that we live in, the church still was a sanctuary, and people still had respect for the church. I just couldn't believe that something like that happened in a church, much less my church.
I remember praying all the way to the hospital, God, I know it's in your power. Please let it be your will. And it wasn't his will. And so I get mad at him because it wasn't his will. And that my daughter had to die.
Yeah, at first I was very angry. I just could not see why a loving God would allow such a vibrant child that loved him so much be taken out of this world in such a violent way. And I had difficulty in dealing with that at first.
But I do know that God is still in control. I know that he's in control of everything that happened, and I know he's in control today.
I knew that it was okay to be angry at God. God's bigger than I am, and I know that God can handle me being angry.
He doesn't have to explain to us. We don't live on his explanations, we live by his promises. And so we just have to keep claiming his promises every day.
For many years, the Griffins have been helping other people effect positive change in their lives. David, through his work with female inmates at the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and Trelisa in her job as assistant principal at a local high school. Now, with the change taking place in their lives, the Griffins also find themselves on the receiving end.
We have kids come by the house that just need us to tell them it's going to be okay.
I would let them go to Cassie's room by themselves, and they could go and sit, or, you know, they ended up writing notes and leaving them in this little plastic bucket that Cassie had there with notes in it. So they would write notes and put them in there. But they blessed me just by coming to the house. And it makes me feel good to know that they still care. That they still care about the family, even though Cassie's not here.
We love to minister to kids, and they minister to us, so it's kind of a two-way streak right now for us.
Kim Jones and her brother Tim grew up in Saudi Arabia, where their father works as a safety consultant in the oil industry. The relationship between the Jones kids was not one of typical sibling rivalry.
Kim was just my best friend. She was the best sister that I could have ever hoped for. When I was sad, she'd be there to calm me. When I was angry, she'd be there to comfort me. When she was sad, I was there to comfort her. And we were just like two peas in a pod. I loved her. Her faith was unbelievable. At times, I couldn't even understand it. I think the biggest thing about her faith is that she loved everyone unconditionally, not with her love, but with the love of Christ.
She loved Jesus. She had such an excitement for him that I've never met anybody like her. She just wanted to know him. Not only about him, but she wanted to know him.
There was a bus trip that he took out to the beach. And in Saudi Arabia, the traffic is really horrendous. They drive on either side of the road and at all speeds because there are essentially no traffic laws. And they almost had a head-on collision. Well, everybody was screaming and yelling, and Kim's comment was, I missed a chance to go see Jesus. So her love was just incredible.
God began working in her life, and her heart was just always to please him. So he began little things like she just went to one of her friends at the dorms, and actually the dorm head, and said, you know that I need to know more about God, so we need to start a Bible study.
God, we come to you tonight, and God, I thank you that we can come and read.
The night before Kim died, she was leading our Bible study, and we've been studying Paul. And she basically sat there, and she was setting up about Paul. She talked about in Galatians where it says he's set apart from birth, and talked about how we were all set apart to do things that God has called us to do. And then she had us turn to Psalm 139 and talked about how we're fearfully and wonderfully made.
She was beaming. And I just remember thinking to myself, how can I be on fire for God like this girl? She is on fire for God. And if you want to know what it means to be in love with the Lord, you need to meet this girl.
And then she got down a little bit further where it says, and the Lord knows the numbers of our days. And basically she just sat there that Tuesday night and just said, y'all, we have to live for God every day. Every day counts, and we're not guaranteed tomorrow, but we have to make the most of each day.
That night was especially different because she went around to each one of us, looked each one of us in the eye, and made sure that we were okay. And it was kind of like God was preparing her.
And it was really neat that God's timing, that he let us have that time with her and let her lead and let her not just be a fellow student, but be one sharing with them and challenging them to go and be different.
The day of the shooting, Stan and Stephanie Jones were traveling back to the Middle East. In a hotel room, they watched television for news of a developing hurricane, then heard a disturbing special report.
Tragedy in Fort Worth. Wedgwood Baptist Church. So my heart just started sinking. And then it said youth rally, and it was like a knife just went through my heart. And I knew that somehow Kim had been affected.
My comment to Stephanie was, either we believe or we throw it out the window. So we decided, well, Lord's true. And he doesn't talk to me very often. In fact, I'm not really sure there's maybe 3 or 4 times in my life I can really say, I've heard something. And this time it was, do you trust me? And it was as clear as a bell. And what can you do when the Lord says, trust me?
And then we got on our knees and we prayed and we said, God, you are our God. You are sovereign. Nothing comes to us and that you haven't allowed. And so, first of all, we praise you that you are the God that you are. And then we just said, we can't do this on our own. So we claim your strength. You say that you won't give us anything that we can't handle. We can't handle this. You have to do it. And then we prayed, Lord, if there is anything that we can do to bring glory to your name as a result of this, then our heart is to bring glory to your name. And so that was our pledge. And we just said, at that point, we didn't want to miss any opportunity to try to help bring good from this.
Today, Kim's family continues to spread her influence, thanks to a videotape made just 2 months prior to her death.
You know, in a certain sense, we are all just travelers, we are all just on a journey, and we are heading for our home. I think sometimes we lose sight of that.
So I think just the opportunity for Kim to keep spreading the gospel through this video has made the biggest impact on us.
We are strangers and aliens in this place. This isn't it. And someday this body of mine is gonna die, it's gonna pass away.
We are sad. It is the hardest thing that we have ever had to go through, but we know that God is the master of all masters.
Because of Shawn Brown's influence, his wife Kathy Jo now visits the gym faithfully. The workouts increase not only her physical strength, but also her emotional healing. The Browns first met in college, where Shawn was a leader in Baptist student ministry.
I just really recognized his maturity and the zeal he had for the Lord. He was the head of the evangelism part of BSM, and he was really excited always about getting to share Christ with people. And I remember that was probably the most important thing that attracted me to him, besides the fact he was really, really cute and handsome. He was passionate about being a Christian, and he was passionate about being a wonderful husband, and he was passionate about being a wonderful friend. And Shawn was just passionate about being a real, genuine man, and man of the Lord, and a man that God, first of all, would be pleased with, and second of all, that his family would be pleased with. And we both really looked forward to having a large family, and I know that Shawn would have been a wonderful daddy. I love to talk about our last day together because it was such a wonderful day. That very morning, we both had our time with the Lord separately, and we were on our way to see you at the pole at my school. And I was really excited because I knew Shawn would be there, and he would be there to lead the prayer, and I was excited for some of my children who would come. And as we went there that morning, I just thought how neat life was, and how excited I was for the night that was about to follow when we had our rally at the church. So we had a wonderful time at the pole, and Shawn prayed a beautiful prayer about God showing us who he really is, and about us knowing God in a very deep way, and he prayed for our school. And then that night I got home, and Shawn was already here, and after we saw each other and were excited about going to the rally, he said, well, I think that the Corbeys want you to babysit. And so as I left a little bit before Shawn, I went and got ready to pick up the kids at their baseball game and then meet him at church. And I told him I loved him, and I told him goodbye, and I started to walk towards his door. And then I stopped, and I thought, you know. I turned around and I said, I just really haven't gotten to kiss you enough today. And I went back and I sat in his lap and got to give him a big kiss and tell him I loved him and goodbye. And that was the last time that I saw Shawn alive. And I am so thankful that the last time I was with Shawn is a very, very precious memory, that God blessed us with a wonderful night together, and that he even prompted me to go back and to know that I got to kiss him for the last time here.
As she looks back over the months and days leading up to the shooting, Kathy Jo takes comfort in the assurance that, although surprised by what took place, she was not left unprepared.
On Friday night, the night before, on the 10th, Shawn and I were at a football game, a high school football game, and we were walking and talking, and he said, you know, Kathy, I love being married to you, and today I was thinking it would be really, really hard if we were to lose one another. And he said, but all I could think of was that we would be with Jesus if that happened, and it's all going to be okay. And I remember thinking, oh, that would be awful. I don't even want to think about it. And yet just 4 or 5 days later, that really did happen. And I think it's neat that he reassured me even on that day that even if that happens, we'll be with Jesus, and he's got a perfect plan, and it's all going to be okay in the end. When I get at my lowest point sometimes, the thing that just lifts me up again is that God reminds me of how thankful I am that I got to be his wife even for a short time. And I'm very, very thankful that God didn't try to spare me the pain to keep me from being Shawn's wife. It's worth it all that I was his wife for 1 year and 9 months.
Every day brings a new step in the healing process. And on this day, Kathy Jo prepares to take a giant leap, moving from the only place she and Shawn called home. As friends help pack her precious memories, Kathy Jo takes comfort in knowing Shawn had a hand in the move.
Shawn and I had seen this little house over 1 year ago. And Shawn said, you know, someday we might want to move in there. And he asked the people about it, and they said they weren't ready to rent at the time. And in the last few months, they called me and said, we just wondered if you'd like to move into our little guest house. I was just amazed that although I'd rather move there with Shawn Brown, if I had to go anywhere and leave this little home of ours, I want to go where he would want us to go. I know that God's going to use that place there as a place of healing, and I know God will make it home for me.
And so, the healing continues. People still hurt, but for the families of Wedgwood Baptist Church, there is also hope. That the faithfulness of their fallen will be remembered, and that triumph will continue to emerge from their tragedy.
Everything that happens, even the evil things, and this was an evil thing, even the obscene, despicable events in human history, the promise of Romans 8:28 is that God will turn those evil things into good for his saints and into glory for his Son. And so, philosophically, theologically, I'm committed to the fact that God was and is going to be glorified through all of this.
I would much rather have my husband and the other 6 that were taken, and that everything would be okay. But that is the most wonderful thing about how God can redeem anything. And through that tragedy, our prayer, mine, and I know I speak for the others as well, is that God would continue to bring people to himself, that their deaths would not be in vain, and that's what he has done.
He changed me. He gave me a relationship with him, something awesome, something that I did not know, something that I had been longing for, something that I had been asking for, but did not know how to find.
I think our youth group is stronger, and we realized that being a Christian isn't just like something that you should take for granted, that it's like a real thing, and it's life and death.
And how we respond to this is going to have spiritual implications not only upon our hearts and lives, but upon a watching world. The world has been watching to see how the followers of Christ respond in the face of unmitigated evil. And thankfully, by the grace of God, we've been able to respond with hope and even joy in the midst of the darkest circumstances we've ever experienced.
Most days I'm able to go into church and to forget that my daughter was killed in that sanctuary. Some days I'm pretty much fixated on the spot where my daughter was killed in the second row down front. But I feel very strongly that that church is my home, and I'm not going to let Satan keep me out of my home.
We are standing on holy ground is one of our favorite songs, and we firmly believe it, that no matter if the enemy should come in with guns blazing, this is God's house, this is holy ground, and we're taking it back.
We are standing on holy ground, and I know that there are angels, they're all around. Let us praise Jesus now. We are standing in His presence on holy ground. We are standing, yes, we're standing on holy ground. And I know that there are angels, they're all around. Let us pray, come let us praise Jesus now. We are standing in, we're standing, we are standing in, oh yes, we're standing in His presence. We are standing in His presence on holy
The preceding program was a production of the North American Mission Board of the Southern Baptist Convention.